Hello, and welcome to the new series I'll be doing about Super Mario Sunshine Arcade 2. This will be an in-depth look at all the levels in the hack. In each video I'll cover the design and technical aspects of exactly one world. I'm not going to go into every little detail about how to execute each task, so for that please check out my other tutorial series. The link for that's in the description. This will be more of a big picture commentary on how I managed to do everything in the hack. Before I start, I want to make a shout out to our community on Discord. If you want to learn more or to make your own hacks, this place is pretty essential. It's the best place for community discussion, news, or to ask any questions. So without further ado, let's get into it. The first thing you're going to notice is that there's no intro cutscene. In Sunshine, each cutscene is stored in a THP file. And in fact, if you look at the game's files, you can actually see these cutscenes and play them with VLC Media Player. But removing the cutscenes isn't as simple as just deleting these files. For whatever reason, if you delete these files, the game just plays another cutscene instead. So the way I remove them is to make a one-frame blank THP file. A guide on how to make your own THP files is linked in the description.
Super Mario Sunshine! Woohoo!
Moving on to the title screen, I decided to edit the water and add Corona Mountain. Models can be replaced with a tool called Super BMD. If you look at the old title screen, you'll notice that the water texture is clearly tiling. Also, the water looks kind of strange. Compared to the fantastic looking water in the rest of the game, this one looks kind of muddy, and I don't know why this is. My theory is that this is actually a mistake by Nintendo, because if you change the texture settings in JD3 Viewer, you can actually make it look exactly like the other water in the rest of the game. If you want a more in-depth analysis on how the water works, there's a great video I linked in the description about this. On top of the changing the texture settings, I also enlarged the texture so that the tiling will be way less obvious. But this made it so the texture animation didn't loop properly. Texture animations are controlled by BTK files, which specify exactly how the texture scrolls over time. Yoshi2 made a tool to edit these, and I couldn't be bothered to actually make my own new animation, so what I decided to do is edit the loop options. There are 4 loop options for each texture animation. There is play the animation once, play the animation on loop, play the animation forwards then backwards once, and there's number 4, which is exactly like number 3 but it repeats. So I decided to just botch it and just pick option 4, and that means that if you notice, there's a weird time where the animation will loop and it will start playing backwards. But I figured that most people wouldn't be on the title screen long enough to notice that, so I decided to just leave it in. Before we dive into the first level, I want to talk about assembly code. Editing files in the game will only get you so far, and if you want to change the game's behavior, you need to edit the machine code. The disk contains all the instructions for the game to run, but it's not as easy to read as a language like C# or JavaScript. The disk only actually contains instructions that the GameCube needs to execute. These are just a bunch of numbers that represent simple instructions like loading a value from a memory address or adding 2 registers together. These numbers are then fed to the CPU, and that's how the game is executed. The next level up in terms of human readability is assembly language. It's essentially the same as machine code, except it uses mnemonics and separates key values to make it easier to understand. Converting from machine code to assembly code and vice versa is really easy. The next level up would be to decompile the code, but that's a difficult task. That's why hackers will work on the level of assembly language to make small changes. Another important part of editing the machine code is the symbol map. This tells you the functions' names, and it's really helpful in finding out what to edit. Not every game has a publicly available symbol map, but luckily the symbol map for Super Mario Sunshine was on the PAL and Japan versions of the disc. If it weren't for this symbol map, I probably wouldn't be able to make any of the edits that I made in the hack. The change I wanted to make was to edit the code that loads the next level. In this case, I just hijack a function called deCideNextLevel and just overwrite the start of it and then branch back when I'm done with my edits. The GameCube uses PowerPC as its instruction set, and if you want to learn more about that, there's a link in the description to a guide by IBM. The most important tool for this whole hack was the bin editor. And in Sunshine, the way everything works is there's the level and there's the objects that are in the level. And the objects are everything that you can interact with or that's moving like NPCs, trees, or blocks, that kind of thing, warp zones. And the location and all the data and parameters are stored in what's called the scene.bin file. I just keep the map constant and then copy over the scene.bin and then edit it for each world, which means that actually making one of these levels is pretty quick and efficient. There's also a second bin file, which is tables.bin, and you want to look out for this one because it contains a few things you might not expect, such as the wires and certain camera effects you can have in there. So if you can't find an object, perhaps you can try and look in the tables.bin. Now going into the first level, the reflection effect here is actually pretty simple. I just copied the entire model and mirrored it manually in Blender. There's no fancy graphical effects here. Also, there's a small imperfection in the lighthouse. When I mirrored it, I flipped the normals on most of the model, but I actually forgot to flip the normals on the lighthouse. So if you look closely, there's actually a big hole in the lighthouse, but I decided to leave it because whatever, I didn't care. The next thing is these blocks, and this is something really important about the whole hack, and it's about knowing the size of everything. And in this case, each block is natively 200 by 200, but in this case they've been scaled, so each one is 400 along. And what that means is, if I know that, I can scale them perfectly and position them so that there's no gaps, and also so that they don't overlap at all. And this is really important. And also the other thing that's really important is that making sure that everything here is on the same axis, so there's no actual drift. You'll notice that everything's centered perfectly. Alright, let's move on to this tree here, and you'll notice that the platform's huge, and the reason I did this was so that people could master the tree physics here in a safe environment, and then they're going to move on to here. And if I had to do this again, I probably wouldn't have these being sandblocks, because I feel like you're adding like 3 layers of escalation. Oh, well, I'm dead. But yeah, you kind of want to escalate in small steps, and here I didn't do that. And I think actually the design for this game gets way better as time goes on. You'll also notice that there's no lives. The lives go down, but then when you come back there's one more, and the way I did that was to just comment out a piece of the code saying that the lives goes down by 1, just get rid of that. Blue coins in this game don't trigger that annoying prompt that asks you to save. This edit was thanks to Noki Doki, and I've actually got to thank this guy a lot because he helped me a ton with the assembly code. So if you have any questions about the code, I would ask him. The way you do this is just by replacing one of the instructions with a no-op, which is basically the assembly equivalent of commenting out a piece of code. This person here says that you can get all the blue coins at the end. And the reason I did that was because when I played through the first one, I didn't really expect people to try and get all the coins. I thought of them as just like a bonus, but people, when they played it, they really wanted to find all of them, and then they got really paranoid when they missed one, and they reset. So I decided it would be way better if they can just get them if they miss them, because there's no way of going back. I suppose now is a good time to talk about blue coins in this game. In the original game, they were equivalent to 1/10 of a shine sprite. In my opinion, this was their main problem. Since they have a conversion rate to shine sprites, collecting all the shine sprites and collecting all the blue coins were made into one and the same goal. But in reality, they're 2 separate goals. There are 240 blue coins in the game, so most people playing are likely to give up on finding all of them. This has the knock-on effect of making people give up on collecting all the shine sprites because the 2 collectibles have now been linked. I know I didn't bother collecting all 96 real shine sprites in my playthrough of the game. That's why I didn't want to make blue coins in my hack convertible into shines. You might argue that that makes them worthless, but I believe that they have intrinsic value. Another problem with blue coins in the original game was the fact that it was never clear how many were in each stage. So it was important I made clear that there's always exactly 1 blue coin in each stage by telling the player this in the opening cutscene. In the end, the blue coins in Arcade ended up serving the same purpose that the star coins served in the 2D Mario games. Alright, this is the second level, and you'll notice the camera, you can't skip it, and the reason that is because normally this level is the level where it shows Shadow Mario kidnapping Peach, and it doesn't allow you to skip that intro. so that's the reason you can't skip it. And then this bit, in the old one, there was a shine right there. I decided to extend it a little bit. It's not much, but yeah, just added a couple sandblocks here, and yeah, that's basically it for this level. There are a few things in the vanilla game that were hard-coded. This means that they don't rely on any of the stage data like the scene.bin or the models. Instead, they rely on the machine code. For example, some stages expect the map model to have specific properties like bones. The problem this presents for hackers is that the modified stages won't have what the game expects, and the level will crash. The only way around this is to edit the DOL file, which contains all the machine code for the game. To find the hard-coded sections, just track the locations in the DOL where the episode or stage number are loaded from memory, and replace them with dummy data. I did this for a few things, and I'm not sure what I disabled, but it works now, so I'll just leave it. So this level doesn't actually have any intro cutscene, and that's because some of the plaza levels, it doesn't load them. Something you may have noticed here is that the text on the bottom was changed, and that's actually pretty simple. All of the text in this game are stored in what's called BMG files. I don't know why they didn't just use TXT files, but whatever. And there's one called messages.bmg or something like that, and you can just change all of them. And yeah, so I did that as a little detail. These boats were changed from the first one. They used to have this little block thing, but that was way too hard, so I decided to make it a little easier and add the boats in like this, and then this one's lowered down, so you don't actually need to climb on the tree at all actually. And yeah, so that's basically it for this level. The original idea for SMS Arcade was to make a handful of 16 secret levels, but when I couldn't figure out how to change the music in each stage, I decided to theme each level on a world from the original game. For example, in the previous level I used boats from Delfino, but it's important to not get too carried away here. I had to restrict the number of objects I used for each world for a few reasons. Firstly, it helps spread out the use of mechanics across the whole game, meaning each world would feel fresh without becoming too repetitive. Secondly, it helps make each world a unique place. Thirdly, levels in each world were easier to pass since there were fewer mechanics at play. And finally, by restricting the number of tools I had to work with, it made coming up with the ideas for each level much easier. This level was really hard in the first one because I didn't allow people to have enough time. I knew the boat patterns, but they didn't, and that's something that's really hard as a designer, is because you can't put yourself in the shoes of someone who doesn't know anything when you're the one who made the level and you're the one who played it like 1,000 times, and you think, oh well, this is really obvious, they're going to know how to do this, they're going to know that this boat is there, but they don't. This water's here so you can't actually run out of water, and this is something I was quite careful about, which is getting in a situation where Mario's stuck but he isn't dead. He's just like out of water, or he can't progress. I mean, obviously if you run out of water over here you're stuck, but I figured that at some point you've got to let people, you know, judge by themselves or have to manage this themselves. But for the most part I made it so that you can't actually run out of water and get stuck, or like there's always a source of water available if you have flood. Another thing is these coins here, these ones are normal size, and you can see the shadow is normal size, but the red coins, because it's kind of hard to judge the perspective, I've changed the hitboxes so that actually all of them are way bigger. And so you'll notice on some of the coins in the game have way bigger shadows than they're supposed to, and that's because the shadows, presumably based on the hitbox, but they still look normal even when they're made bigger. And so this little tip, you can change the scale to make them easier to catch. See, the shadow there was massive. And that'll be it for this one. It's not so hard now because I changed the time, I made it way less lenient, but it's still quite hard because people panic anyway. Even if they've got tons of time, they'll just be like, oh well, I've got to get quick, so they make mistakes, and actually the best way to do it is to just chill out, because the times now are pretty easy. This level was actually originally supposed to be a massive maze, and I made the whole maze, and then I realized that it was way too many blocks and the game could not handle it. So there's actually, it's nothing to do with the polygons, it's to do with the fact that each block is its own class, so it takes up a certain amount of memory, and if you have like thousands of them, it's just going to lag out the whole thing, and yeah, it's not very efficient. So yeah, I had to scrap it. I had to make it a little bit more minimalist. And yeah, there's actually an interesting strat here you can do. If you ground pound, when the block disappears, you preserve the downwards momentum. That's because in this game, when you're walking, well, when you're standing on the ground, it doesn't actually set your speed to 0. It just stores it. And this is the same thing that allows you to do rocket storage. There's a little strat here where you can do, I even noticed this as the game developer, where you can do that. That's what the speedrunners do as well. So when I made this game, I actually did think of these kind of strats, but the point is, and my philosophy about this is that if they can do it, that's great, but always make sure that it's not required to know these weird strats. So there's always an easy way to do it. And if the speedrunners can find a way to do it quicker, I don't really mind. I kind of like it, in fact. It's quite fun to see how they break it. And there's actually a load of spots where I didn't expect them to break it. And they did, because there's some glitches I didn't actually know about. Also, while we're up here, we can take a nice look at this. You'll notice the plaza not properly shaded, because when I imported the model and edited it, when I put it back in the game, some things weren't preserved. If I could go back, I'd probably do that, but I thought it was good enough. The stage I just completed was the reason I implemented the array tool into the bin editor, and it ended up being a very useful tool for me. When building stages, the relative position of objects is the most important thing, not their actual coordinates. If you know the sizes of each block, and you really should, then the array tool makes building stages where each object is placed properly much easier. This level, a lot of people like this level. It was pretty much the same as it was in Arcade 1, except I changed it to Water Slide from Super Slide, because at the time I couldn't think of the name. Yeah, I thought the reason I came up with this level was I was trying to make like a slide level with the water slide, but I realized that if you go downhill you don't actually get much more speed, so I thought, you know what, I'll just make the whole thing flat. And there's a coin there, and yeah, so that's how I came up with this idea. For whatever reason, the model is blue on the console edition. I have no idea why this is happening, but I'll just blame Yoshi 2. Another thing you might notice is the, well, I've already lost here, but I just want to show this off. The reason I put these piantas here is because they don't actually load. Like, you can see that they're just all popping in. And so to reduce the pop in, I just thought, yeah, I'll put them on the corners so that when you're turning, you don't see it directly in front of you, and then you turn, and then they all are. If you put them on the straight, then you can't see them at all. Like, if I put them at the end of this straight, you wouldn't be able to see them, and then suddenly they'd all pop in and it'd look really weird, so that's why I actually put them there. Also, I want to point out that this one's a chuckster, and it's quite funny, but I've only seen one person fall for it, because most people talk to one of them and then they like, realize it's nothing, so they move on, and just one, I don't know, 1 in 20 people are going to get pranked by that, and I thought that was funny. That's the only like troll thing in the game. I didn't want to make this game like a Kaizo hack, so that's the only sort of dumb Kaizo thing I put in the game. This sand block here is actually meant to distract you away from the blue coin. The idea was people are going to just use it as a shortcut. A lot of people thought that the blue coin was in here, but no, it's not. It's over here. So that's why the sand block is over there, is to actually make this coin more hidden, because most people won't bother going on this last corner. In Super Mario Sunshine, each stage folder contains all the data for that stage. For example, every stage that has a pianta in it will have the pianta model stored in its respective folder. This is quite a space-inefficient system, but it's quite handy for people making hacks. Effectively, this means that every stage can have its own versions of each object. It also means that every level can have an entirely unique map model, and that's how I was able to add the racetrack to that level. It's the same process of replacing models for the other levels. This level I wanted to make a 100 coin level. A lot of people didn't like this hack, this one in the first hack, so I decided to make it a little easier by adding a couple more coins. But I'm just gonna mostly skip over this. There's not much to talk about here. Yeah, so I'm just gonna collect them and we're gonna move on. I decided to add this island so that you didn't actually ever need to use the boats, because a lot of people who were speedrunning it were saying this is really annoying that it's cycle based, so I decided, you know, I'm going to add the island to make it less cycle based. This rocket nozzle is needed for the blue coin. Yeah, it wasn't originally needed, but I decided it probably should be, because otherwise it was just completely pointless. One quick comment about these nails is that if you spawn the coin from them, it can disappear. And the issue with that is that I couldn't use these to count towards the total coins, because it would technically be possible for someone to pound all the nails and then not grab the coins, and then have there be less than 100 coins available for them to collect. And I never want it to be so that the people can't collect all the coins. So all of these nails are actually unnecessary, but in order to get the rest of the coins you have to do all the boxes and get the island over there. But in total there's way more than 100 coins, and that's really important for a 100 coin mission, is because otherwise it's just really annoying. If you miss one nail, you have to do the whole thing again, and I thought that was stupid, so I decided it's way better if you always have way more than 100 coins for a 100 coin mission. One unfortunate consequence of these weird rails is that some people get pushed off unceremoniously from these boats when they take a sharp corner. And I don't know why this happens, and that's why I couldn't fix it. And I'm really sorry to everyone who died playing this level right at the end there. I'm sure it's happened to quite a few people, so yeah, sorry about that. Moving on to the last level here, you'll notice the coins going down, and that's actually a script that puts all the coins down, so that's why you'll see yourself losing coins after a 100 coin mission. And the reason that is so that people can never collect like 100 coins by gathering a bunch from the previous levels, and if you did collect 100 coins it would probably break the game. This is a small change. I added 2 platforms so that way the cycles are less punishing. Yep. It looks like you can make it from here to the island, but if you try, you'll actually hit an invisible wall, and that's because there's no collision on the island. So yeah, that's what happens. One design flaw is that I completely forgot about the fact that you could quite easily jump here. Well, if I can do the spin correctly, you can, and make it across. And the reason I didn't think of this is because I just didn't. But yeah, so you don't actually need to interact with these piantas. And also another thing is, if you talk to these guys, you'll actually see a hidden error message, but it's actually impossible to talk to them anyway. So yeah. And that's about it for this world. These cubes were also slowed down from the previous game because they were quite hard, and again, it's the first world, so I decided I'm just going to make it a little easier. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. Tune in next time for a look at Bianco Hills.